Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to a time of silence, sandals, and sword polish. Picture this, a long dirt road winding through rice paddies. You're walking it now, heavy armor jangling with each step. Sweat is pooling beneath your layers. Your co-sewed, the underrobe sticks uncomfortably to your back. The sun is dipping below the treetops, casting a gold wash over the thatched roofs of your village. You finally reach home, peel off your breastplate with a groan, and collapse into the gen can. Then you smell it. The laundry pile. Because being a samurai might have meant honor, bushido, and the poetic appreciation of cherry blossoms, but it also meant laundry. Lots of it. And not the kind you toss into a washing machine with a scented pod. No, we're talking grimy tabi socks, stiff hakama pants, and armor pads soaked with sweat, blood, and maybe a hint of pickled radish from lunch. You probably won't survive this. Not because of war or dishonor, but because drying socks in rainy season is a full-time job. So, before you settle in and drift into this space, if you find yourself enjoying what you're hearing, take a moment to hit like and subscribe. But only if it truly feels worth it to you. And hey, if you're listening from somewhere special, drop your location and local time in the comments. We love knowing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights a little, maybe turn on a fan for a soft ambient hum, and let's begin tonight's journey gently together. You're back from patrol, and your co-sewed is not okay. It's stiff with dried sweat and trail dust. The neckline is yellowed from wear, and the underarm seams? Let's just say they've seen things. You strip down in your tiny quarters, open the wooden chest where your spare clothes live, and pull out another co-sewed, slightly less tragic but still bearing yesterday's scent of roasted fish and humidity. You could take this to your mother or younger sister, but you're trying to be self-sufficient. Besides, they already did it last week. And you know laundry has a strange rhythm here. It's not every day. It's when there's time. It's when there's water. It's when the sun actually shows up. You gather your laundry bundle, co-sewed, socks, arm wraps, underpants, and a dingy head towel, and step outside to the small corner of the compound where washing happens. It's nothing fancy. Just a few buckets, a slab of smooth river rock, and a washboard made of cedar. You splash cold water into a pail, squatting beside it on your haunches. The water is cloudy even before you start scrubbing. That's fine. That's normal. You reach for a small wooden scoop of rice bran powder, nuka. It's pale, soft, and smells faintly like dry cereal. You sprinkle it into the bucket, swirl it around, and watch it bloom into a kind of milky wash. This is your detergent. You press the co-sewed into the water, then start scrubbing. Gently at first, then more insistently. The underarms get special treatment, as do the cuffs, which are stiff from all that sword grip sweat. The rice bran acts as both cleaner and softener, somehow lifting the worst of it without stripping the fabric. Mainstream history books don't usually talk about this. They cover the epic battles, the noble suicides, the tea ceremonies. But nobody tells you that samurai lived in the same bodies as the rest of us. That they sweated. A lot. That their underclothes were often far more important than their swords. And speaking of swords, you glance at yours, leaning nearby. It's been cleaned already meticulously. Why? Because a dull sword might kill you, but a smelly co-sewed? That kills your dignity. There's a part of your brain that wonders, did they always do it like this? Historians still argue whether rice bran was a luxury or a staple. Was it used by every class, or just the better-off ones? Some say per samurai would have used ash water. Others say even ash was saved for soap making and rituals. You scrub until your arms ache, then lift the co-sewed out and wring it tight. The water runs brown. A good sign. You set it aside and do the socks. The tabi are stiff, crusty, and smell like a combination of leather and defeat. These take longer. You shift position on the packed dirt. The sky is darkening. A mosquito buzzes by. Somewhere nearby, someone is beating a garment against a flat stone in rhythm with a lullaby. It's oddly soothing. As you rinse the last of your pieces and hang them on a bamboo pole to dry, you notice a neighbor doing the same thing. She nods at you. You nod back. There's a strange camaraderie in communal suffering. By the time you're done, your hands are raw, your co-sewed is dripping clean water, and your nose still tingles faintly with the scent of rice husk. It's not rosewater, but it's something. And maybe that's what honor smelled like sometimes. The next morning arrives soft and foggy with a gentle mist clinging to the eaves of your roof. You shuffle out, still groggy, and check your laundry line. The co-sewed is damp. Again. Of course it is. Welcome to rural Japan, where sunlight is a luxury and humidity is your uninvited house guest. You touch the sleeve, it's only half dry, and somehow the underarms are still wetter than when you hung them up. You sigh. Which brings you to an uncomfortable truth, it's time to rotate your wardrobe. But first, you take a closer look at what exactly you've been washing all this time. Samurai didn't just have one outfit. They wore layers. Always layers. First came the shitage, the basic undershirt. Then the fundoshi, your loincloth, a humble, stretchy friend that definitely got the worst of it. Over that went the kosode, which literally means small sleeve like a proto-kimono, but more practical. And on top of that, hakama trousers, sometimes pleated, sometimes not, depending on your level of formality and your ability to not trip over them. Let's not forget the kyahin, those shin wraps to protect your legs from branches, bugs, and boredom, and the juban, another inner robe worn for added warmth or modesty. Altogether, a samurai's outfit was less of a suit and more of a complex burrito. Which, of course, meant more laundry. You gather your laundry from yesterday and decide to inspect the damage. The kosode isn't so bad. A faint mustiness, but that's tolerable. The fundoshi, however, smells like it fought its own battle and lost. You turn it over in your hands, wondering what your ancestors would have done. Because here's the secret no one really wants to talk about. Sometimes they didn't wash it at all. Sometimes they just aired it out and hoped for the best. You drape it over a bamboo rack and mutter a quiet apology to the neighbors. Across the courtyard, someone is scrubbing a juban with something that looks like porridge. You squint. Is that barley? Turns out, in addition to rice bran, samurai households used grain-based scrubs. Barley, millet, and even old rice, especially when mixed with fermented brine, created a sort of gritty, soapless cleanser. It wasn't exactly floral-scented, but it did the job. You poke through a cedar box in the corner of the wash area and pull out another favorite, warajiura, the inner linings of straw sandals. These little pieces got swapped out often, especially after muddy marches. And yes, they had to be rinsed too. No one wants a foot fungus under their armor. And while you're at it, you inspect the wrapping cords from your shin guards. They're sticky. Like, suspiciously sticky. You dip them in a separate basin of warm water and realize you'll need to use a special cleaning trick passed down from your aunt, rubbing with dried citrus peels. Samurai didn't always have lemons lying around, but they did have yuzu or kabosu, small sour fruits that doubled as deodorizer and mild cleanser. You rub the cords with peel shavings, releasing a burst of sharp, citrusy scent. Honestly, it's the best your laundry smelled in days. But this leads you to a deeper truth. Cleanliness wasn't just about comfort. It was symbolic. A samurai's appearance was a reflection of their discipline. Dirty clothes could be interpreted as laziness, carelessness, or worse, disrespect to one's lord. That's why, even in the poorest households, you'll find that someone took time to at least press the seams of a kosode or keep the whites looking vaguely white. Yet, historians still argue whether daily washing was common practice or a rare luxury. Some scrolls suggest samurai washed their undergarments after every wear, while others hint at multi-day reuses, especially during travel or campaign season. It likely depended on status, access to water, and whether or not your enemies could smell you coming. You rinse out your cords, lay them in the sunniest spot you can find, and then finally go to change into a fresh set of clothes. Fresh here being a generous term. Sliding into a still damp kosode is one of life's lesser pleasures. It clings like regret. You try not to think about it. You adjust the folds, tie the waist, and smooth the collar. You don't look glamorous, but you look presentable. And in this era, that's half the battle. You pause, looking at the small pile of still dirty garments sitting by the wash basin. There's a temptation to just leave them. But you don't, because today you have to visit your sensei. And if you show up smelling like pond water and shame, you will absolutely hear about it. With a sigh, you gather the next round of laundry, this time including your summer kosode, which is thinner but also more prone to ripping, and begin again. It's not glorious. It's not legendary. It's not the kind of thing they put in scrolls or war songs. But it's what kept the world running. Samurai fought wars. But someone always had to wash the underwear. You're ankle-deep in lukewarm rinse water when it hits you. There's no soap here. Not really. Not the kind you'd know today, anyway. No pastel-colored bars with floral embossing. No synthetic suds. No citrus-scented anything. What the samurai had instead was a whole category of not-quite soap and a lot of elbow grease. You glance at the bucket of cloudy water in front of you. That rice bran slurry is fine for everyday grime, but sometimes, especially after muddy patrols or a sweaty training session, you need a deeper clean. That's where the ash water comes in. Yes, ash. You scoop a small handful from a nearby ceramic jar labeled in fading brush strokes. It's the gray, soft kind from burnt pine wood. You mix it with hot water and stir until it becomes something halfway between soup and sludge. Then you dip in a stained white sleeve and start working the ash mixture into the fabric. It doesn't smell great. It doesn't feel great. But it works. The ashes have natural alkaline properties that break down oils and sweat. If it's good enough for your neighbor's battle-scarred Jubin, it's good enough for your sock cuffs. There's a strange satisfaction in this. You feel a little like an alchemist, blending ash, water, and patience to transform something disgusting into something wearable. Still, it's slow. Your fingers are turning pruny and your knees are numb from kneeling on cold stone. And yet, there's a rhythm to it, a humble choreography of soak, scrub, wring, rinse, repeat. And here's where it gets even weirder. Some households didn't even bother with rice bran or ash. Instead, they boiled soapwort, a humble plant that foams mildly when agitated. Or they collected runoff water from the steamed cooking of adzuki beans, which contains natural saponins. Yes, bean water. Laundry soup. Congratulations, you've invented pre-modern Tide Pods. Historians still argue whether these methods were widespread or just regional quirks. Some scrolls reference soapwort being used only in certain mountain villages, while others hint it was more common than we thought. The truth is, so much of this domestic knowledge was passed down orally, and if your grandmother never wrote it down, we've probably lost it. You pause, lean back, and stretch your shoulders. Nearby, an older woman is rinsing something big and unwieldy. It's a futon cover, judging by the weight of it. You exchange tired smiles. Laundry warriors united. You reach for the charcoal jar next. This one's for smell. Powdered charcoal, when sprinkled lightly onto damp fabric, can absorb odors over time. Not immediately, but if you're patient, your co-sode won't reek quite so boldly of fermented radish and foot. You apply it carefully, patting it into the fabric before folding the garment neatly for storage. Now comes the wringing. The art of it is in the twist. Too tight, and you risk breaking the delicate stitching around the collar. Too loose, and you'll be dripping ghost water through the tatami mats on your way inside. You twist slowly from the bottom hem to the neck, then snap the garment once, just once, before hanging it on the bamboo pole. You glance up at the sky. Still gray. Still no sign of full sun. But it doesn't matter. You've developed a laundry sixth sense. You know that if the breeze holds, these garments will be dry by evening. Probably. Back in the wash bucket, you see the water has turned nearly black. You dump it out into the designated corner of the garden where wastewater goes. It's been composted there for generations, and refill the bucket from a large ceramic jug stored beneath a bamboo overhang. You've developed a whole system now. It's not elegant, but it's yours. And then, like every weary samurai launderer before you, you take a moment to examine the inevitable casualties. A tear in the armpit seam. A faint dye run along the collar. A mysterious new hole in your sock. You patch what you can. You pretend you don't notice what you can't. And you remind yourself, most people weren't washing for beauty. They were washing for survival. For decency. For the bare minimum level of not smelling like a defeated cavalry horse. As you gather the last of your clean garments and lay them out neatly on a woven mat, a soft gust of wind rustles the sleeves. The garments breathe again, even if just for a while. And so do you. Laundry without soap? Somehow yes. And now your co-sode smells like warm ash, steamed barley, and triumph. By late morning, your arms ache. Your knees feel permanently folded. And you've somehow managed to splash enough gray water on yourself that you'll need a rinse too. But before that, it's time to get fancy. Or at least, slimy. Because today, you're about to use something that looks like it belongs in a sushi bar. Not a laundry kit. Funori or boiled seaweed. You retrieve a small pouch of brittle, dried red algae from a lacquered box. It's tangled, delicate, and smells faintly like a beach picnic gone slightly wrong. This is funori, Japan's ancient answer to fabric conditioner, starch, and odor neutralizer all rolled into one slimy miracle. You drop a handful into a pot of boiling water over the garden stove. The seaweed wilts, melts, and eventually releases a gooey, slippery substance that looks suspiciously like something you shouldn't touch without gloves. But this is the magic part. Once cooled slightly, you dip your co-sode into the slimy liquid and let it soak. Not only does it soften the fabric and help maintain its shape, it also leaves behind a faint protective film that discourages stains and, believe it or not, bugs. Moths hate this stuff, and if it smells slightly like a tide pool, well, that's the price of cleanliness. You swirl the fabric gently. It glides through the liquid like silk through jelly. You hum a little tune, not because you're cheerful, your back is screaming, but because there's something almost meditative about it now. There's no rush, just the slow, careful motion of hands that have done this 100 times. Funori wasn't just for samurai robes. It was also used in papermaking, painting, and even hair care. Talk about multitasking slime. Historians still argue whether funori was used in everyday laundry or only reserved for more formal garments. Some Edo period household records suggest it was common, while other sources imply it was reserved for festival wear and ceremonial kosodes. Either way, your sleeves are soaking in it now, and they feel fantastic. You gently wring out the robe, marveling at how smooth and slightly heavier it feels. There's a sheen to it now, a kind of luster that wasn't there before. You lay it flat on a fresh bamboo rack, positioning it so the sleeves hang just so. Presentation matters. Even if only 3 people ever see your laundry line, you don't want to look like someone who folds like a barbarian. Meanwhile, a neighbor clatters into the courtyard with a full basket of hakama and jubin. She sees your glistening funori-drenched kosode and raises an eyebrow. "Going fancy today?" she jokes. You shrug, smiling. "Figured I'd try to impress the tatami." That earns a chuckle. It's moments like this when you realize laundry was also social. A time when neighbors shared tips, gossiped, or silently acknowledged one another's effort with a respectful nod over a dripping sleeve. Sure, the sword gets all the attention in samurai tales, but the wash basin? That's where the real diplomacy happened. You step away for a moment to prepare the next batch, your thinner summer kosode, worn mostly during rice field inspection days. It's made of hemp, dyed a soft blue-gray that fades beautifully over time. You inspect it for tears, finding a small rip under the arm seam. You'll need to stitch that later, but for now, the cleaning comes first. This one's delicate, so no ash water. You opt instead for the milder rice bran rinse, followed by a quick dip in a second batch of funori. It's become your new favorite. Somehow, smelling slightly of the sea is better than smelling like sweat-soaked archery practice. As you work, you notice something. The texture of the fabric shifts subtly under your fingers. Softer, smoother, lighter. The funori does more than clean, it restores. You imagine yourself as a kind of fabric whisperer, coaxing these tired garments back to life one sleeve at a time. And that's when it happens. The sun comes out, just a sliver through the clouds, but enough to send golden light spilling across your laundry line. You exhale in relief. Finally, things might actually dry today. You reposition the racks to catch the best angle of sun and wind, adjusting them like a solar panel array. Each garment flutters lightly in the breeze, glinting faintly with its fresh seaweed coat. You sit down on a flat stone, damp sleeves rolled up, and let your hands rest. You've earned it. Today's wash was more than just functional, it was ceremonial, almost a renewal. You look at your freshly rinsed kosode and think, it won't win a duel, but it might make someone smile at the tea house. And really, what else do you need? Your fingers are still a little sticky from the funori rinse when someone calls your name. You glance up from your drying line to find the steward waving from the edge of the garden. He's pointing toward the bathhouse. It's your turn. You make your way slowly over the stone path, feet bare, kosode sleeves rolled and pinned to keep them from brushing the damp ground. As you step into the bathing area, the scent of hinoki, Japanese cypress, greets you first. It's a sharp, woody, calming. The kind of scent that makes you forget for a moment that you're here to do even more cleaning. This isn't a luxurious private soak. It's a wooden tub, built low and deep, steamed gently with water heated over firewood. Beside it sit 2 smaller buckets, one for rinsing yourself before entry, and another for the clothes you're about to attempt cleaning while you bathe. Multitasking, samurai style. You dip a toe in. Still too hot. You wait. The concept of sharing bathwater doesn't faze you anymore. Everyone does it. Family members, retainers, guests, even the occasional traveling monk. Cleanliness here is not just about personal hygiene, it's about community rhythm. You don't just wash with people, you wash near them. You hear their stories, their jokes, their minor complaints about the weather or the price of daikin. Sometimes you even trade laundry tips. Nothing builds trust like knowing someone's preferred sock drying technique. Once the water cools enough, you step in and let it rise up to your collarbone. Muscles that had been tensed all morning begin to unfurl like boiled spinach. You close your eyes. You breathe. And then, like any true multitasking samurai, you reach over the edge and grab the garments you brought. Yes, it's a thing. Laundry in the bath. Not your outer layers, of course. Just small stuff, tabi, undercloth, maybe a head towel or a sweatband. You lather them gently with a handful of rice husk ash mixed with water from a ceramic scoop. You rub them against the wood slats of the tub, rhythmically, carefully, as steam rises around your face. Some people say the warmth helps loosen the grime. Others say it's just convenient. Historians still argue whether bath laundry was a common samurai practice or a clever workaround invented by overworked housewives. Either way, your socks are getting cleaner. A servant enters, nods politely, and begins cleaning the floorboards. No one speaks. The sound of dripping water, sloshing buckets, and a bird chirping somewhere above creates a soundscape more calming than any lullaby. You pull your garments from the water, give them a final rinse from the clean bucket, and hang them on a nearby bamboo hook to drip dry. They'll need sun later, but for now, this will do. You linger a few minutes longer in the tub. Not too long, hot baths aren't meant for napping, but just long enough for your thoughts to wander. You think about the layers you washed earlier, about the hours you spent coaxing stains from fabric, the small pleasure of soft sleeves and restored collars, and how funny it is that for all the legends written about samurai glory, no one mentions the daily victories over mildew. Eventually, you step out, dry off with a towel that's seen better days, and dress in your thinnest kosode. It's been mended so many times you've forgotten what parts of it are original. But it's clean. That's what matters. Back outside, the sun is doing its best. You check your drying rack. The kosode is nearly there. The socks are halfway. The fundoshi is being difficult, as usual. You adjust the garments to face the breeze more directly, tilting the bamboo poles just so. This part of the process is basically weather negotiation. Will the clouds hold off? Will the wind pick up? Will a bird ruin your perfect drying line just because it can? The odds are never in your favor, but still you try. You glance at the sun's position. Early afternoon. You could probably squeeze in one more rinse batch before the light fades. But your body protests. Your back is tight. Your fingers ache. Your stomach grumbles like a dishonored ronin. You decide to pause. To sit beside the drying line, legs stretched out, kosode fluttering like little flags of surrender. You pick at a loose thread, watching a bead of water roll off a sleeve and land in the dirt with a sound no one notices but you. There's something deeply human about this. Something oddly beautiful. The simplicity of it. The repetition. The fact that someone hundreds of years ago knelt in the same way, rinsed a kosode in the same kind of bath, stared at the same uncertain sky, and hoped, just like you, that it would dry before dinner. It's late afternoon now, and you've finally changed into fresh clothes. Or as fresh as they're going to get when dried in humid air and brushed against 3 separate garden insects. Still, you feel better, cleaner. Even your mood is brighter until you remember what's still waiting in the corner. The underwear dilemma. You walk over slowly. In the woven basket at your feet sits a balled-up fundoshi, slightly stiff from yesterday's battle with gravity, sweat, and your regrettable decision to chase a runaway chicken through muddy grass. It's one of those garments that carries shame like a fragrance. Fundoshi is humble, just a long strip of cloth, usually cotton or hemp, worn snugly around the waist and between the legs. But don't let its simplicity fool you. It's arguably the most important thing you'll wear all day, and the most likely to betray you in summer. You shake it out. It makes a sad, wet snap in the air. Time to deal with it. In the age of the samurai, underwear maintenance was both a necessity and a logistical puzzle. Most warriors only owned a few pairs, one on your body, one drying, one slowly disintegrating in the laundry pile. If you were poor, that number dropped to 1.5 and a prayer. You fill a small bucket with lukewarm water, toss in a pinch of rice bran, and begin scrubbing. But here's the thing, this isn't a normal garment. The twist zones, the places where cloth rubbed most against your skin, need extra attention. You work your thumbs along the inner edge, trying not to imagine all the lives this fundoshi has lived. As you wash, you recall a scroll from years ago. Your sensei had shown it during a winter lecture. It detailed proper hygiene for foot soldiers. Rinse daily if possible, air dry between battles, and never wear a damp fundoshi to bed unless you wish to dream of demons. You laughed. You're not laughing now. Historians still argue whether samurai really prioritized underwear hygiene or if the obsession was more of a later Edo period refinement. Earlier records are spotty, probably because no one wanted to memorialize their undergarment routine in ink. Understandable. But what we do know is that underlayers mattered. Samurai armor was layered over multiple garments, not for fashion but to keep the steel from tearing skin, to wick away sweat, and to provide just enough padding so your ribs didn't rattle like loose chopsticks every time you moved. And these layers, especially the ones closest to the body, got filthy. Daily. You imagine marching for hours in summer heat, layers of linen pasted to your back, fundoshi clinging like betrayal, and then somehow still being expected to engage in mortal combat. You'd probably surrender to a mild breeze. You finish rinsing and wring the fabric out with more force than necessary. It slaps the side of the bucket with a satisfying squish. You hang it carefully on the edge of the rack, hoping no one walks by just now. A fluttering fundoshi isn't exactly a badge of honor. Next, you inspect your Hyde-8, the headband worn under your helmet. It's stained with salt and sweat and a suspicious orange patch that might be pickled plum juice. Or blood. Hard to say. You give it the same rice bran and charcoal treatment, then beat it gently against a flat rock. That's a trick your cousin taught you, softens the cloth and makes it dry faster. Or so she claims. Your neighbor calls over from her line, holding up a strange garment, a child's coat, so tiny it looks like a doll's outfit. Ever try washing with soy milk? She asks. You blink. That's a new one. Apparently, some families use diluted soy milk to soften particularly scratchy hemp fabric. It sounds dubious. It probably attracted every cat in the village. But you nod politely and pretend to jot it down mentally. You never know. Desperation has many recipes. You sit back on your heels, watching your laundry sway gently in the late sun. Somewhere down the road, a bamboo wind chime clinks lazily in the breeze. A chicken clucks nearby, possibly the same one you chased earlier. The air smells faintly of soapwood and scorched miso. And despite everything, despite the sore wrists, the suspicious stains, and the ongoing war with humidity, you feel a strange sense of pride. These clothes may not shine. They may not smell like lavender fields. But they're clean. Clean enough to sit down, eat dinner, and sleep without itching. And sometimes that's enough. By now, the sun is dipping lower, its golden light stretching long and slow across the garden like it's trying to delay the inevitable. You squint toward the riverbank where steam still rises in thin ribbons from the laundry rocks. That's your next stop. You sling a bundle of damp garments over your shoulder and make your way there barefoot, the packed earth cool beneath your soles. The river's just a short walk away, nestled between low pine trees and whispering reeds. It's not much, shallow, slow, barely deeper than your shin, but it's where real scrubbing happens. You pick your usual spot, a smooth, flat slab of granite warmed slightly from the day. Other families have been here already. You can see faint sudsy residue in the water and a few forgotten clothespins fashioned from split bamboo. Someone's sock drapes across a bush like a discarded flag of surrender. You kneel at the edge and dunk your bundle. Immediately, the water clouds around it, dust, ash, and questionable traces from today's bathhouse routine mixing with the current. You don't flinch. You've done worse. Then comes the stone scrub, an ancient art form of questionable comfort. You take your sewed sleeve and slap it sharply against the rock. Not once, not twice, but rhythmically. There's a technique to this. It's not just about force, it's about rhythm and angle. Too soft, and you do nothing. Too hard, and you shred the fabric. The slap echoes across the trees. Thwack, thwack, swish, thwack. This was one of the oldest forms of deep cleaning in Japan, especially for larger or coarser garments. No soap, no heat, just water, motion, and whatever aggression you'd been quietly bottling up since the last time someone told you you're wringing it wrong. Of course, this method had its downsides. If you did it too often, the threads wore thin. If you didn't do it enough, the sweat and dust built up until the garment turned into stiff origami. You try to find that middle ground where the stains lift, but the fabric forgives you. Historians still argue whether samurai themselves scrubbed garments this way or whether this was mostly done by their servants or family members. The reality probably varies. During peace, sure, someone else might handle it. But during campaign season, you were on your own. You paused to rub one of the sleeves with a handful of river sand, using it like medieval stain remover. The coarse grains work well on stubborn patches, especially around the cuffs and collar where oil builds up. It's surprisingly effective, primitive, but efficient. Beside you, a young boy is doing the same with his older sister. She's scolding him for scrubbing too hard and nearly tearing the cloth. He rolls his eyes and switches hands. You smile quietly. Laundry might not be glamorous, but it does have its moments. You return to your own work, now shifting to a larger piece, your thicker outer coat, stained from last week's rain and a regrettable encounter with a leaking miso jar. This one needs more time. You soak it thoroughly, then apply a thin layer of ash paste made from pine soot and charcoal. It looks ridiculous, like you're seasoning a steak, but it lifts the worst grime. The sun begins to dim. You wring the fabric with both hands, letting the dirty water run off into the river like it's never existed. There's a strange piece to it. You're not just cleaning clothes. You're resetting, washing away the day, preparing for tomorrow. Once the garments are wrung out and gently rolled, you tie them with twine into small bundles and sling them over a pole across your back. They'll dry at home overnight if the air behaves. As you head back, a breeze picks up. Leaves rustle. The scent of clean water and warm pine lingers on your sleeves. You walk slowly, relishing the weight of your effort, the softness of your palms, and the faint soreness in your shoulders. You're tired, but it's the kind of tired that makes dinner taste better. By the time you return to the compound, the sky is peach-colored and the courtyard shadows stretch long and sleepy. You untie your bundles and hang them one last time, this time under a covered ledge in case the rain comes early. The stone-scrubbed coat sways slightly in the wind, looking less like battle gear and more like something you'd wear to tea. Which is fitting because tonight, after all that, you deserve tea. The sky has turned lavender now. That late twilight hour where colors feel heavier, like the whole world is wrapped in silk. The fireflies aren't out yet, but they're thinking about it. And you're back in the courtyard, crouching beside your bamboo rack, trying to solve a mystery every samurai household has faced: how to dry laundry at night without turning it into a moth buffet or kindling. The fire is crackling gently nearby, heating a pot of barley porridge. You resist the urge to move your drying garments closer to the flame. That's how your uncle once set an entire coat on fire. He said it was a spiritual accident. Everyone else said it was sake-related. You play it safe. You move the rack instead further from the heat, but angled just enough to catch the last breath of warm air rising from the hearth. Some families used low-hanging lanterns to keep moths at bay. Others hung fragrant herbs like mugwort or shiso near the racks, swearing the scent repelled both bugs and bad luck. You try the latter today, tucking a sprig of dried mugwort into the edge of the line. It smells like mint and smoke, earthy, strange, and oddly comforting. You flick a corner of your coat, testing its dryness. Not bad. Still a little damp at the collar, but it'll finish overnight, probably. Maybe. Hopefully. And now you wait. You sit cross-legged beside the rack, listening to the sounds of evening, frogs in the distance, the occasional clink of bowls from a neighboring house, someone quietly plucking a biwa string in the dark. Laundry has its rhythms. And sometimes that rhythm includes staring at wet fabric and muttering curses under your breath. Tonight, the air feels heavy. Moist. You can almost feel the mold spores warming up their vocal cords. You grab one of the thinner Juban garments and give it an extra shake, just in case. Then, using a trick you learned from a retired monk, you twist the bottom hem slightly and clip it to the rack with a carved wooden peg. This lets water drain down the twist and out faster, at least in theory. The monk also believed tofu could cure toothaches, so take it with a grain of salt. Historians still argue whether nighttime drying was common practice or considered poor form. Some say it was only for emergencies or during rainy seasons when daytime sun was rare. Others argue it was perfectly acceptable as long as the garments were hung under cover and not left to absorb dew. You debate it further, but you're too busy swatting a mosquito with a towel. Eventually, you realize that the real trick to night drying isn't technique. It's patience. You have to learn to trust the wind, to believe that the air will carry off the moisture before the mildew moves in. It's a gamble, but then most things in life are. You duck inside the storeroom and come back with a small basket of rice husks. Not for eating, for deodorizing. You've made a habit of storing clean but slightly damp garments inside husk-lined cedar boxes. The rice absorbs moisture and neutralizes odor. It's a quiet miracle. You lay the last few dryish pieces inside, patting them gently with husks like you're tucking in a sleepy child. Then you close the box with a soft thump and exhale. The laundry line is lighter now. Only a few pieces remain. You leave those hanging for the breeze to finish. You won't be watching them anymore. You're done. Well, almost. You look down at your own sleeves. Your current coat is dry, sure, but it's been worn all day. The cuffs are stained from lunch prep and the left sleeve smells faintly of soy sauce. You debate it. Do you toss it in the basket and start the whole process again tomorrow? Or do you just ignore it and hope no one sniffs you too closely? You sigh. Into the basket it goes. You stretch your arms above your head, joints cracking, shoulders aching in that satisfying way that only a day of mild suffering can deliver. Laundry isn't glorious, but it's grounding. It makes you pay attention to details, teaches you to appreciate sun, breeze, dry hems, and the noble courage of a stubborn clothesline. As you head back inside, the fireflies finally appear, just a few, blinking lazily above the pond. You pause at the doorway, look back at your drying rack, and offer it a silent prayer. Don't rain tonight. It's the middle of the night when you wake up. Not from a noise exactly, but from a feeling, the sense that something is off. You sit up slowly, listening. No footsteps, no storms, just the occasional chirp of insects and the steady hush of wind slipping through the pines. Then it hits you. The air smells different. You bolt up, scramble across the floor, and throw open the sliding panel to the courtyard. The smell is faint but unmistakable mildew. Your laundry line is sagging gently in the moonlight, garments hanging still as ghosts. You move closer. One of the thicker cosodes, the one you stone-scrubbed earlier, is damp again. Not just a little, fully, as if the night air had exhaled straight into the sleeves. This is the risk of night drying, especially in the early autumn, when the humidity climbs back up after sunset and settles over everything like a wet blanket of betrayal. And you forgot to tilt the rack under the eaves. Rookie mistake. You glance at the rice husk box, still sealed, thank the gods. Those pieces are safe. But the rest, they're going to need triage. You move quickly now. One by one, you unclip the damp garments and drape them over the indoor rack near the hearth. It's still warm from earlier, radiating a soft glow. Not hot enough to burn, but just enough to coax the damp out of fabric like steam rising from tea. You remember something your grandmother told you. If your cosode smells of mildew, so will your reputation. At the time, you'd thought it was dramatic. Now, you're starting to understand. Once the rescue mission is complete, you throw on your outer robe and sit beside the drying rack with a small clay jar in your lap. Inside is your secret weapon, charcoal sachets, made from finely crushed Bincoton charcoal and wrapped in muslin. These little pouches are tucked into sleeves and collars to absorb lingering moisture and neutralize odor. You gently slide one into the kosode collar and another into the fold of a hakama. It's the ancient Japanese version of a dryer sheet, except it won't make your clothes smell like a lavender field. More like absolutely nothing, which in this case is the dream. Historians still argue whether this particular charcoal method was widely used in samurai homes or originated later during the merchant class hygiene boom in Edo. Either way, it works, and you're not in the mood to argue with results. Satisfied, you settle into a cushion and sip a lukewarm cup of roasted barley tea. Tastes like ash and regret, but it's soothing. You watch the garments slowly dry in the hearth's fading warmth, their fabric glowing softly like parchment lit from behind. You start to think about smells, how powerful they are, how much they meant back then. Samurai might not have had cologne, but they had scent memory. The smell of oiled armor, the musk of horse sweat, the faint citrus tang of vinegar foot soaks, and, of course, the unmistakable whiff of someone who'd worn the same kosode for too many days in a row. You once overheard a captain whisper, "I can tell the rank of a man by his scent." You're still not sure if he meant rank like status or rank like reek. Probably both. You stand again, this time to check the progress. The outer kosode is drying nicely, thanks to the fire. The fundoshi? Still questionable. You press your palm against the cloth and feel a cold squish. Not ideal. You open the window a crack, let in more air, and drape the fundoshi over a tall stand by the door. If it's still damp by morning, it's going straight into the rice husk box and being ignored for a week. Maybe two. Finally, you roll out your bedding again, exhausted. Your room smells faintly of smoke, pine, and old fabric. Not bad, not great. Somewhere between ascetic monk and wooden chest in a damp cellar. You'll take it. You drift back to sleep thinking about air circulation, about humidity, about the idea that somewhere, 1,000 years from now, someone will invent a machine that does all this for you. You don't know what it'll be called, but you know it will hum and spin and leave your socks warm and dry in minutes. And maybe, just maybe, it'll come with a little sachet that smells like seaweed and smoke. The morning greets you with pale light and a suspiciously soggy breeze. You sit up, stretch your arms overhead, and sniff the air cautiously. Still no mildew. A miracle. You step over to your drying rack and check the kosode hanging closest to the hearth. Dry. Warm. Success. The fundoshi, however, remains cold and damp. It has officially entered do not discuss territory. You fold what you can, lay the driest pieces flat in the cedar box with a sprinkle of rice husks between layers, and set aside one kosode for the day ahead. Then you open the wooden shutter just enough to let in a bit of light and the smell of smoke. Alright, it's armor maintenance day. You know this because the courtyard has suddenly filled with the sounds of hammers tapping, leather creaking, and someone coughing violently from a poorly timed whiff of oil smoke. You make your way outside, fresh kosode on, sleeves tied back, and face the inevitable. It's time to clean your gear. You retrieve your armor from the storage rack. It's not a full suit, just chest plating, a pair of sodi, shoulder guards, and some kote armored sleeves, bound with layered silk cords. They're heavy, slightly sticky, and faintly smell of yesterday's boiled radish. Somehow, they always do. You settle onto a low stool and begin the ritual. First, a soft cloth dipped in warm vinegar water to wipe down the metal plates. The vinegar disinfects and helps lift grime, though it also leaves your fingers smelling like pickled plum for hours. Then comes the oiling. A thin layer of camellia oil, carefully rubbed across the surface with a tightly wound cloth. It brings out the subtle sheen in the lacquer, prevents rust, and gives the armor that just polished glow that says, "Yes, I can fight you and reflect the sunrise off my chest." You always liked this part. There's something strangely intimate about it. The way you inspect every link of the kusari chainmail, every notch in the sodi. You remember when each dent happened. That one, from sparring with your cousin. He swung wide and knocked you into a pine trunk. This one, a tumble during patrol when you stepped on a frog and slid into a rice paddy. The frog was fine. Your pride was not. You move to the textile parts next. The silk cords that hold everything together are fraying. Again, you dab at the worst spots with rice starch water to help tighten and strengthen them. Then you lift one of the kote and sniff cautiously. Mistake. You stagger back slightly. That's where the deodorizing powder comes in. Made from powdered bamboo charcoal, dried citrus peel, and crushed dried fern. It's applied like a medieval body spray, generously and without mercy. You rub it into the arm lining and hope for the best. Historians still argue whether samurai took this much care of their armor daily or only before inspections and major campaigns. Some records suggest daily wiping was expected, especially among lower-ranking samurai who couldn't afford repairs. Others imply that servants handled most of it. But again, when you're marching or patrolling or just trying to keep your arm from smelling like boiled eel skin, you do what you must. You set the kote aside and move to the helmet, kabuto. The inside is padded with layered linen and smells slightly better than you remembered. You brush it out gently and leave it in the sun, crown tilted just enough to let the light hit the inner fold. A trick you picked up from an old archer who claimed the sun burned off bad dreams. Finally, you reach into the storage box for your armor cloth. A large square of dyed cotton meant for wrapping and carrying your gear. It's a bit dusty and smells of cedar, but that's intentional. Cedar helps keep insects away. You shake it out, fold it neatly, and prepare to rewrap everything. Just then, a neighbor strolls by, sees your work, and nods in appreciation. "Smells like you're ready for a parade," she jokes. You smile. Or at least a very dramatic grocery run. The truth is, for many samurai, armor was more than protection. It was presentation. A polished suit told people you were disciplined, that you took care of your tools, that you took care of yourself. A dirty, unkept kabuto could speak volumes, and not the kind of volumes you wanted people whispering about in the bathhouse. You finish bundling the armor, set it aside, and give your hands a quick rinse in a basin of hot water laced with lemon peel. The smell lingers, bright, clean, maybe even heroic. And in the quiet that follows, you look around and realize everything that needed washing today, cloth and metal, sweat and memory, has been seen to, at least until tomorrow. By mid-morning, the courtyard has quieted again. The armor's wrapped, your sleeves are clean, and the lingering scent of vinegar and camellia oil has finally begun to fade. You think for a moment that maybe you've won the day, but then you step inside and trip over a pile of linen. Not just any linen, the smell of honor. Specifically, honor soaked through the soles of your old Tabi socks. You pick one up by the corner like it's radioactive. It's hardened into a curious shape, almost architectural, like a failed origami attempt involving feet. The inside is stiff with sweat, the outside is caked in a mysterious dirt that smells suspiciously like dried fish. You sit down with a groan and begin your next task, sock resurrection. Tabi socks weren't just simple footwear. They were a symbol of readiness, of order, of cleanliness, yes, but also of reputation. Samurai were judged not just by how they carried a sword, but how they carried themselves. And part of that meant not having socks that could double as melee weapons. You fill a bucket with warm water, sprinkle in rice husk ash, and add a few drops of plum vinegar. A trick you picked up from a washerwoman with no teeth and too many opinions. She swore by it. You submerge the socks and watch as tiny clouds of gray-brown shame bloom into the water. As you scrub, you remember your old sensei's advice: you can't lead men if your feet reek. He was half joking. Maybe. Historians still argue whether personal cleanliness was a matter of daily samurai discipline or simply a reflection of wealth and free time. Some say even high-ranking warriors got away with being a little ripe during long campaigns. Others claim that discipline started with the body and thus the tabi. You wring out the first sock and begin scrubbing the soles with a small brush made of palm fibers. It makes a rhythmic shuff-shuff-shuff sound, oddly satisfying. As the dirt lifts away, you notice something, a patch where the fabric's begun to thin. You'll have to reinforce it later, maybe with hemp thread, or prayers. The second sock proves even worse. It smells like it was possessed by the spirit of a damp boot. You open a tiny cedar box near your basin. Inside are dried yuzu peels. You crush one between your fingers and toss it into the wash water. A burst of citrus rises like an apology from the depths. Now comes the drying dilemma. These socks are too fragile for the fire, too slow to air dry by evening. So you turn to an old trick, the tea box technique. You open a shallow wooden drawer near the hearth and pull out a handful of used tea leaves, dried and finely crumbled. You sprinkle them over a clean cloth, lay the socks flat inside, then roll the whole bundle into a neat tube. The tea absorbs moisture and odor while leaving behind a subtle, earthy scent. The kind of smell that whispers, "I wrestled honor into submission before breakfast." You set the sock roll near the window, just where the sunbeam kisses the floor. Then, because you're already in this deep, you decide to clean your head towel, a humble square of cloth that sees more action than your actual helmet. It's sweat-soaked, stained with soy sauce from a dropped lunch bowl, and carries the unmistakable scent of your panic from yesterday's failed sparring match. You soak it quickly, scrub it gently, then slap it against a post like it insulted your ancestors. The slap echoes satisfyingly. Across the courtyard, your neighbor chuckles. "Washing shame out by volume?" she calls. "Just the usual," you reply. "Smells like dignity in here." She tosses you a sprig of mint from her garden. "Tuck that in with the socks. It's what I use on my husband." You thank her, wrap the mint in cloth, and slide it into your tea sock bundle like you're tucking in a child. Now it really does smell like dignity. And foot sweat. But mostly dignity. You sit for a moment, arms folded, surveying your domain. A row of clean tabi drying under the eaves. A head towel flapping bravely in the breeze. The scent of mint, vinegar, tea, and defeat floating gently through the air. Samurai may have written poems about cherry blossoms and noble deaths, but deep down, you know someone, somewhere, once wrote a haiku about clean socks. Probably went like this. Wind through pine trees hums. Tabis dry where honor sleeps. Sunlight folds them whole. You hum to yourself, breathing in that odd mix of pride and mild laundry fatigue. The armor's polished. The kosode is clean. The socks no longer resemble medieval biohazards. For today, at least, you smell like someone who could be trusted to carry a sword and sit politely at a tea gathering. Tomorrow? We'll see. The sun is nearly overhead now, and the air feels thick, like it's been soaked in broth. You duck into the shade of the storehouse, gulping a few sips of lukewarm barley tea before heading to your next destination, the war camp. Well, not an actual war camp. More like a training encampment set up a few hills over for weekly drills. But it's dusty, chaotic, and most importantly, lacks plumbing. Which means you're about to discover just how creative samurai had to get when it came to hygiene on the move. You arrive mid-afternoon. The air smells like horse sweat and scorched rice. Dozens of men are drilling, shouting, or sleeping in awkward positions with their feet sticking out of half-collapsed tents. There's a wash station, if you could call it that, really just a long wooden trough filled with murky water and several skeptical-looking rags hanging from a line. You find your assigned tent, toss your travel bundle inside, and roll up your sleeves. There's no time to be delicate here. You've brought 2 kousod, a spare fundoshi, and one of your lighter jubin, all of which already smell like you've been camping for a week. Nearby, 2 soldiers are engaged in the age-old samurai ritual of arguing about laundry. One insists that rubbing garlic on armpit stains helps ward off evil spirits and mosquitoes. The other claims garlic ruins the cloth and your love life. Neither seems particularly clean. You head for the trough. The water is lukewarm and vaguely yellow, which is a bad sign. You decide to pre-rinse your kousod in a separate bucket. The trick out here is resource management, 1 bucket for rinsing, 1 for soaking, 1 for pretending you don't know where that color came from. You sprinkle in a pinch of ash from the nearby cooking fire and stir until it becomes a light gray cloud. In goes your fundoshi. You stir it gently with a stick, which is both practical and emotionally helpful. Out here, you can't rely on fire-heated baths or seaweed soaks. So samurai developed a kind of makeshift field routine. Boiled water, if available, was cooled and poured through layers of cloth filled with sand, creating a primitive filter. Add ash or even vinegar if you could spare it, and you had a vaguely effective rinse cycle. You try a similar trick now, pour clean water through your sleeve like a funnel, letting it wash over your soapy fabric as evenly as possible. It works. Sort of. At least the kousod no longer smells like cooked eel. You find a flat rock and lay out the garments to dry in the sun, weighing down the corners with stones. You know from experience that the wind likes to carry off fundoshi like it's playing a practical joke. Next up, oily rag technique. Since water is precious and full soap is rare, some warriors used cloth soaked in camellia oil and pine ash to wipe down their gear and even parts of their skin. You grab one of the old rags from your bundle, darkened with age but still usable, and dab it in a little pouch of oil you brought. You wipe your forearms, your neck, and finally your face, careful not to drip oil into your eyes. It removes the worst of the grime and leaves a protective layer against dust. You wipe your kousod collar the same way, careful not to stain it further. It's not glamorous, but it works. You don't feel fresh exactly, but you feel less disgusting, which is something. Historians still argue whether samurai in the field really did this level of maintenance or whether the romantic image of grit and filth was closer to the truth. Some letters describe fastidious routines, while others admit to smelling like salted fish and vengeance. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. You check your drying line. The fundoshi is flapping bravely. The kousod is halfway there. The jubin is sulking in a shadow and may need to be moved. You relocate it closer to the tent flap where a breeze occasionally stirs. In the meantime, you eat a cold rice ball and try not to get soy sauce on your knee wrap. That's when you overhear a veteran warrior giving hygiene advice to a newcomer. If you can't clean it, bury it in dirt overnight, he says. Then beat the spirits out in the morning. You're not sure if he's joking. You might try it anyway. As the sun dips lower, you gather your drying garments, fold them as best you can, and return to your tent. You slide the freshly cleaned kousod over your head. It smells like ash, pine, and effort. It clings in a few damp spots, but it's leagues better than what you arrived in. You sit on your folded blanket, looking out across the camp. Men are brushing horses, sharpening swords, or bickering over who stole whose wash bucket. The smell is not good. But your little corner? Your kousod, your socks, your oil-rubbed towel? Your corner smells like someone who tried. And in a war camp, that's heroic. You wake the next morning in the war camp to the not-so-gentle sound of someone loudly clearing their throat right outside your tent. It's barely dawn, the sun's still tucked behind the hills, but already there's the sharp, familiar smell of charcoal smoke and something else. You sniff. Burnt rice? No. Sweat. Wet armor. Morning breath on a battlefield. You sigh and sit up, stretch your back, and reach for your kousod from the day before. It's dry now. Sort of. You shake it out, then pause. There's a reddish stain along the cuff. Not rust. Not miso. Blood. You blink at it for a moment, then look at your hand. No cuts. You check your neck. Still intact. Which means the stain is borrowed, a generous donation from yesterday's sparring partner. Or possibly from when you leaned against that spear rack a little too casually. Regardless, the stain needs dealing with. Because back in your own village, walking around with a blood-stained kousod, even a small smudge carries a complicated weight. To some, it says valor. To others, sloppiness. To most, it just says, that's going to be hard to wash out. You kneel by your wash kit and pull out a small ceramic jar. Inside is a mixture of salt and sake, your go-to for fresh blood. The salt pulls out the pigment, the sake breaks it down. Or at least, that's the theory. You dampen the spot with water, then dab the mixture on with a soft cloth, rubbing gently in circles. It works sort of. The color fades from a vivid accusation to a pale rumor. You'll need to repeat the process when you get home, maybe with a bit of white radish paste, another traditional stain remover your aunt swears by. As you scrub, your tent mate stirs and groans. Let it be, he mutters from his bedroll. Better to wear it like a medal. You glance at him. His koso looks like it's hosted a small barbecue. You don't argue. Bloodstains in samurai culture carried nuance. In some cases, they were left deliberately. A commander might wear a soiled sleeve as a badge of bravery. But for everyday life, especially in front of one's lord or household elders, cleanliness reflected discipline. You don't want to be the guy who shows up to a ceremony looking like you slept inside a battlefield stew. Historians still argue whether samurai truly took pride in visible blood or if that was just romanticized later in plays and storytelling scrolls. The reality was likely pragmatic. If it couldn't be cleaned, you made it into a tale. You rinse the koso, wring it carefully, and hang it again outside the tent. The sun has finally risen, spilling gold across the tents and weapon racks. Steam rises from rice pots and someone is yelling about missing sandals. You head toward the edge of camp where the river trickle begins, a thin stream, more mud than water, but good enough for a second rinse. On the way, you pass a soldier scrubbing his sleeves with wood ash and horse urine, a recipe so old and so unpleasant it almost had to be effective. You offer him a look of deep sympathy and move on. By the stream, you kneel and gently rinse the koso, swirling it through the cool water. You spot another group downstream using crushed persimmon skins to treat sweat stains. It's oddly beautiful, the bright orange peel fragments floating beside dark cloth like little ceremonial offerings to the laundry gods. You give your koso one final wring and lay it flat across a patch of dry grass, weighting the corners with smooth stones. You'll pick it up in an hour. In the meantime, you lean back on your elbows, squinting at the sky. It's amazing how much energy laundry takes out here. No proper soap, no deep tubs, no warm hearths to finish the job. Just rocks, ash, sake, and hope. You make your way back to camp, grabbing a bowl of porridge on the way. Your tent mate is now airing out his fundoshi like it's a victory banner. You decide not to comment. Instead, you sit cross-legged on your blanket, slowly folding your spare koso. It's not spotless, but the bloodstain's been handled. The collar smells faintly of sake and pine. And when you run your fingers over the sleeve, it feels soft. Cleanish. Battle-ready, if not laundry certified. And that's the thing, samurai laundry wasn't just about being tidy. It was about maintaining presence. Clean robes meant alertness. Order. Readiness. Whether in a village or in a muddy field, you finish your breakfast, gather your gear, and prepare for morning drills. Your koso still dampens slightly at the hem, but you wear it anyway. You've earned it. It's been soaked, scrubbed, salted, and rinsed in sake. Today, it's more than a robe. It's survival. Stitched, stained, and salvaged. Later that day, you return to the village, your koso's still faintly damp and your pack heavier than when you left because somehow camp laundry multiplies. You step through the wooden gate and are instantly greeted by something you hadn't realized you missed. Steam, billowing out of the bathhouse chimney in thick, white ribbons. Warm, fragrant, promising. You breathe it in like a man inhaling redemption. That's when you remember, today is public bathhouse day. You pick up the pace. The bathhouse, or sento, sits near the village center, wooden, slightly crooked, and smelling of cedar, boiled herbs, and other people's laundry. It's the place where you soak away not just dirt, but every unspoken grumble and grudge from the week. Of course, it also means sharing hot water with half the village and navigating bathhouse politics. You step inside, bow to the elderly attendant, and pay with a few coins from your sleeve. You stash your folded koso in a cubby, wrap a towel around your waist, and head into the bathing area. The warmth hits you immediately, soft and enveloping, with the tang of herbal decoction drifting from the tubs. You sit on a low stool, scoop water from a bucket, and begin to rinse. Someone 2 stools over recognizes you from last year's lantern festival. "Still doing your own laundry?" he asks, grinning. Only when it threatens to crawl away on its own, you reply. He laughs and returns to scrubbing his knees. Here in the bathhouse, hierarchy melts away with the steam. Lords and peasants, old warriors and young apprentices, all reduced to wrinkled fingers and slippery feet. But even in this steamy democracy, there are rules. Rule 1. Don't soak dirty garments in the shared tubs. You wash before you bathe. Rule 2. Don't talk about what you saw in the bathhouse unless it's really funny. Rule 3. Never let your towel touch the water. Ever. No one knows why. It's just law. You keep your towel folded neatly atop your head and begin scrubbing your arms with a cloth dipped in a mixture of salt and mugwort tea, a favorite combination for exfoliating and warding off skin irritation. The salt stings a bit on your elbows, but it feels good. Honest. Like paying dues. Beside you, someone is using a loofah made from dried gourd skin, a common choice for stubborn dirt and rough patches. You make a mental note to ask where they got it. Historians still argue whether bathhouse etiquette was as rigid during the early samurai periods or became formalized later with the rise of merchant culture. What's certain is that public bathing was part ritual, part necessity, and part social theater. You finish scrubbing and ease into the hot tub. The water is near scalding. Perfect. You lower yourself in stages: feet, knees, hips, shoulders, and finally lean back, head resting on the rim, eyes drifting toward the wooden ceiling beams overhead. A hush falls over the room, broken only by the occasional splash or sigh. This is what being clean feels like. Not just surface level. Deeper. Like a reset button pressed all the way down. After a long soak, you step out, wrap yourself in your towel, and sit on a low bench by the drying racks. Your koso waits nearby, folded carefully beside a pair of wooden geta sandals. You slip it on slowly, aware of the way clean cloth clings just right, soft in the collar, light on the shoulders, free of grime, of oil, of memory. You pass by the attendant again on the way out. She eyes your freshly washed koso and gives you a nod. Approval. The highest kind. Outside, the evening air feels cooler, but not cold. Your skin steams gently in the fading light, and the path home seems quieter than usual. You walk slowly, not wanting to wrinkle your sleeves too soon. Your koso smells like cedar and soap. Your hair is damp but clean. And for the first time in days, you don't feel like something that just crawled out of a sock drawer. You feel human. And that's victory. Rain. It arrives just before dawn, not in a dramatic downpour, but in that soft, persistent drizzle that makes everything slightly heavier and infinitely more complicated. You wake to the patter of drops against the wooden shingles, the smell of damp earth, and the very specific sinking feeling that your koso probably isn't going to dry today. Welcome to the rainy season, a 3-week stretch of fabric-related despair. You roll out of bed, pad over to the window, and slide it open just enough to peek outside. The garden is already soaked. Your drying rack leans under the weight of overnight moisture, sleeves sagging like they've given up hope. You sigh and mentally prepare for a day of laundry panic. You shuffle to the covered porch where yesterday's washing, supposedly almost dry, now looks as if someone dunked it back into the stream for fun. The hems are clinging to the bamboo rack, and your spare fundoshi has taken on a texture you can only describe as mossy regret. You carry the whole soggy bundle inside and hang it from the ceiling rafters with fresh twine, creating an indoor laundry forest that threatens to dribble on your head at every turn. Not ideal, but necessary. Rainy season laundry is an art of mitigation, not perfection. You're not aiming for crisp folds or sun-kissed collars anymore. You just want things to smell less like old miso and more like anything else. You light a small charcoal brazier in the corner, carefully, cautiously, and place a shallow ceramic bowl of salt nearby. The salt absorbs moisture from the air. The charcoal adds warmth and chases off that creeping damp fabric smell that seems to multiply in the corners of your koso drawer. And yes, you check the koso drawer. Mistake. The scent that greets you is something between fermented rice and forgotten bamboo. You slam it shut again. You begin your battle with the most vulnerable items first, the linen jubin, which is beginning to sport faint patches of mildew. You dab it with vinegar water, sprinkle on a pinch of camellia ash, and hang it near the brazier. The fundoshi goes next, draped over the warmer rack above a small dish of crushed yuzu peel to mask the tragedy. You glance outside again. Still raining. The sky is the color of regret. Your neighbor appears on the porch, equally disheveled, clutching a bucket of damp hakama. Any luck with yours? She asks. You tilt your head toward the ceiling, where your koso droops gently from a ceiling hook like a very clean ghost. They've reached the bargaining stage. She snorts and disappears again into the mist. Historians still argue whether samurai had special rainy season laundry techniques or if they simply gave up and embraced the smell. Some suggest wealthier households had stone-walled drying rooms or fire-fed chimneys designed to help circulate warm air for clotheslines. Others believe that most people just lived with the funk, layering up to trap the smell inside rather than solve it. You prefer to believe in the in-between. The quiet persistence. The slow, determined drip of drying sleeves above warm tea. The commitment to not letting mildew win even when it's clearly winning. You pour yourself a cup of barley tea, sit cross-legged beside the brazier, and begin inspecting your garments one by one. You check for early mildew bloom, faint gray smudges, a powdery texture near the seams. You have a brush ready made of fine straw which you use to gently flick away the spores before they spread. For one co-sewed, the blue one you wore on festival day, it's too late. You'll have to wash it again. You grimace and toss it into a separate bucket. The fabric sighs like it knew this was coming. You pause to add a few drops of plum wine vinegar to the rinse water. Just a few. Your grandmother always said it frightens the mold. You're not sure if she meant chemically or spiritually, but you're willing to believe either. Then there's the issue of storage. You can't just fold and shelve half-dry clothes. That's a trap. Instead, you wrap each piece in soft, breathable cloth, usually repurposed cotton from old underlinens, and set them near the hearth in rotating batches. You even use a fan, hand-powered, of course, to coax circulation into the corner where air refuses to move. You realize around midday that you've spent 6 hours doing nothing but fighting water. Rainwater, steam, damp breath, lingering sweat from a co-sewed cuff. But oddly, it feels like something. Like hair. Like ritual. Like standing your ground with vinegar and yuzu peels against the creeping advance of mold. By evening, the rain slows. A breeze picks up. You crack the window just slightly, enough to let the dry air slide in, enough to feel the corners of your co-sewed begin to lighten. You check one, just one, and find it nearly dry. A victory. Small, but enough. You pull it from the line, fold it neatly, and hold it against your face. It smells of vinegar, yuzu, and stubbornness. A perfect scent. You wake to the sound of birdsong, real, honest birdsong, not muffled by rain or drowned out by arguments about drying space. You blink against the early sunlight, sit up slowly, and realize something miraculous. Everything is dry. You leap to your feet quietly so as not to jinx it and check the garments hanging from the rafters. The ko-sewed? Dry. The fundoshi? Slightly stiff, but that's practically a badge of honor. Even the notoriously moody jubin feels light and crisp in your hands. Today, the weather has offered a gift, and you know exactly how to use it. You carry your cleanest ko-sewed into the outer garden and lay it flat across a smooth rock under the sun. This isn't for drying. This is for airing, the final step in the samurai's sacred laundry sequence. It's the stage where the sun doesn't just remove moisture. It blesses the fabric. You smooth the sleeves, press out the collar, and sit beside it cross-legged, sipping the last of last night's barley tea. The air smells warm and slightly sweet, like sunlit straw. You close your eyes for a moment and let it wash over you. This is the part of laundry no one talks about. The in-between time. When the washing is done, the drying is certain, and you just wait. It's not passive. It's attentive. You watch the fabric in the light, checking how it moves, how it breathes. You gently flip the garment at the right moment, like turning fish over hot coals. As you work, your neighbor strolls by holding a bundle of herbs and a linen sash. Trying something new today, she says, holding up the sash. Fermented sake rinse. For luck. You blink. Luck? Cloth needs luck too, she replies. You nod slowly. You've heard of that one before. A sake rinse was sometimes used on special garments, wedding robes, coming-of-age attire, festival ko-sewed. The alcohol didn't just help clean, it was symbolic. A blessing. A soft armor against bad fortune. You've never tried it, but today feels like the right day. You fetch a half cup of cheap sake from the kitchen, pour it into a bowl with warm water, and stir in a few leaves of shiso for good measure. The scent is sharp and grassy, like herbal wine. You take the pale ko-sewed you wore last moon viewing night, dip it carefully into the mixture, and swirl it with slow reverence. No scrubbing. No soap. Just the gentle sway of cloth in sake-steeped water. When you hang it up, the sun catches in the droplets, casting tiny rainbows along the hem. You swear it looks proud of itself. Back inside, you prepare a drying box, a cedar chest lined with crushed charcoal, rice husks, and dried mint. Into it you place your now dry, freshly aired ko-sewed. Carefully folded, sleeves tucked in, collar flattened. You close the lid slowly, like putting a child to bed. Historians still argue whether this kind of ritual mattered or if it was just a reflection of household personality. Some samurai were known to treat their garments with near spiritual devotion. Others couldn't tell a ko-sewed from a curtain. But one thing is certain, in a world of muddy roads, surprise duels, and smoky kitchens, a clean ko-sewed offered a small island of control. You spend the afternoon folding and sorting. The jubin goes on a separate shelf from the outer ropes. The fundoshi is rolled and tied, ready for next week's drills. You even press a sprig of lavender into your head towel stack. Not traditional, but pleasant. You pause in the doorway as the sun begins to lower, casting long amber streaks across the floor. Your laundry is done. All of it. There are no buckets waiting. No damp sleeves sulking in corners. No mystery stains that demand existential reflection. Just silence. Just fabric. Just order. For dinner, you prepare a simple miso soup and a bowl of pickled vegetables. You sit near the open window, co-sewed fresh against your skin, and let the air move through you the way it moved through the sleeves of your drying line this morning. Cleanliness is quiet. It doesn't shout. It whispers in how the collar lies flat, in how your skin doesn't itch beneath your juban, in how you sleep better with the smell of shiso and charcoal in your pillowcase. As you slide into bed, you realize you've come to appreciate the strange rhythms of samurai laundry. Not because it's glamorous. Not because it's easy. But because it reminds you over and over that being alive, being human, means tending to the things that wear out. And that sometimes the smallest victories, like a co-sewed dried exactly right, are the ones that matter most. You wake early the next morning, not to the sound of birds or footsteps, but to the gentle clinking of metal. That can only mean one thing: today is armor day, but not the polishing kind. No, today is for a full maintenance cycle, including the cloth and padding that sits beneath every steel plate, and most importantly, your waraji, the woven straw sandals that have absorbed an entire season of your life. You step outside and spot your uncle sitting by the shed, surrounded by a small army of armor pieces, rags, and what looks like a pot of something bubbling ominously over a small fire. Rice glue, he says, gesturing at the pot. For repairing cords. You nod solemnly. You're not sure if that's wisdom or madness, but you're about to spend your morning wiping mildew from backplates, so you don't have much room to judge. First, you bring out your Under Armour padding, soft layers of thick linen and cotton designed to keep your body from being sliced by your own equipment. Unfortunately, those layers have not been spared the horrors of sweat, old food, and possibly eel broth. You sniff them cautiously and decide they need the full treatment. You boil a pot of water, drop in a handful of camellia leaves, and let it steep until it smells faintly medicinal. This becomes your base. You add a splash of vinegar, a pinch of salt, and a few crushed yuzu peels. It's not an exact recipe. It's a hope. You soak the padded garment, known as a shitage, in the pot. It doesn't quite fit, so you rotate it carefully like you're bathing a reluctant cat. As it softens, the water darkens, and you begin gently massaging the cloth with a flat stone. You focus on the collar. Always the collar. That's where your neck meets rope, metal, sweat, and sometimes your own poorly tied hair. If there's a single source of household dishonor in the samurai wardrobe, it's a collar that smells like fermented horse. Nearby, your uncle begins brushing down a pair of Greaves' leg guards with oil and muttering about mold. It always starts at the knees, he says. That's where mildew lives. And dreams. You let him have that. Once the shitage is rinsed and wrung out, you hang it from the porch beam and move on to your waraji. These straw sandals are deceptively fragile. Woven by hand from rice straw or hemp, they soak up sweat, dirt, road grime, and rain and rarely dry in time. Some samurai replace them weekly. Others tried to patch and reinforce them until they looked like woven ghosts of their former selves. You take yours cracked, stiff, and already beginning to fray, and begin brushing them with a mixture of charcoal and finely ground salt. It's not about making them look new. It's about pulling out the memory of mud. You scrub gently, then rub them with a rag soaked in warm tea. Why tea? Because plain water dries too fast. Tea lingers. And if you're lucky, it deters the smell. Historians still argue whether waraji were considered disposable or semi-sacred. Some texts describe rituals for burning old pears at temple altars. Others suggest they were flung into rivers or buried under bridge stones as a kind of road offering. You're not quite that ceremonial. But you do place your old pair respectfully on the stone steps when you're done. Just in case. Next is the lining of the kabuto, your helmet. The cloth interior absorbs more than you'd think. Scalp sweat, incense smoke, the occasional tea spill when you tilt your head at the wrong moment. You remove the lining carefully, using small bone needles to unthread the stitches. You soak it in warm water mixed with crushed mugwort and sake leaves, then gently brush it with an old toothbrush your cousin once used for carpentry. Don't brush too hard, your uncle warns. You'll scrub out your memories. Again, you let him have that. While everything dries in the shade, you turn your attention to the armor cord's colorful silk or cotton laces that hold plates together. These are delicate. Fray too much and your armor falls apart mid-battle. You gently tug them straight, then apply a rice starch and vinegar paste to the worst sections, using a thin bamboo brush to coat the fibers. You don't have time to relace the entire set, but you do enough to pass casual inspection. You step back to assess your work. Your armor gleams faintly. Your shiitake drips lightly into a waiting bowl. Your waraji, patched and deodorized, look nearly respectable. And the air around you smells like herbal tea, salt, and the satisfaction of a task almost completed. A breeze kicks up, lifting the hem of your drying kosode like a flag. You feel, for the first time this week, caught up. Not ahead, not done, but not behind. You stretch your arms, roll your shoulders, and sit beside your uncle, sharing a rice cake in silence. He passes you a tiny cup of sake, and you clink it gently against his. Clean armor, he says. Clean thoughts. You nod. Clean laundry. Clean sandals. Clean start. The next morning, the house is already humming with quiet movement. The cook is stoking the fire for rice, someone's folding linens in the side room, and out in the courtyard, you hear the unmistakable slap of a wet towel against stone. Another day, another batch of laundry. But today's wash isn't yours. You've been sent to help a neighboring household, a multi-generational samurai family preparing for a shrine visit. 3 generations, 2 school-aged children, 1 aging grandmother, and a maid with more opinions than garments. You arrive with your sleeves tied back, laundry cloth over one shoulder, and the emotional resilience of someone who has faced mold and lived to tell the tale. You're shown to the side yard where a large wooden tub steams faintly in the shade. Already soaking inside a dozen different garments. A child's kosode with bright red embroidery, a teenage boy's juban stained with ink, an elderly man's underrobe worn to near transparency. Each one demands different treatment, like a group of guests who all want their tea served a different way. The maid, a wiry woman with a deep frown and forearms like temple bells, hands you a long-handled stirrer and points at the tub. Gentle. Clockwise. Think soup, not stew. You do as you're told. The water is cloudy from soybean rinse, a traditional method believed to soften fabric while protecting dyes. It's warm and thick, slightly sticky, and smells like someone tried to make miso with good intentions and poor timing. As you stir, the maid begins brushing collars with charcoal paste and a bundle of dry grass tied into a makeshift broom. Her strokes are practiced, quick, and oddly rhythmic. You mimic her speed and watch the suds change color as the grime lifts. Nearby, the grandmother is supervising from a stool. My robes go in last, she says. Always last. They're clean already. Spiritually. You nod solemnly. One of the children runs past, dragging a sleeve across the ground. The maid groans. You retrieve the garment and soak it again. Grass stains at this point are a rite of passage. You move next to a youth's juban with faint ink blotches, likely from a calligraphy session that got more enthusiastic than elegant. For this, you use a dab of daikon radish pulp rubbed gently in circles with a strip of coarse linen. The enzymes in the radish can lift certain pigments, especially when paired with warm water and mild pleating. Historians still argue whether these domestic hacks were widespread or passed down only through certain family lines. Some Edo-era scrolls mention daikon and barley scrubs in passing, others omit them entirely, suggesting the practices were common knowledge too boring to write down. You find these omissions comforting. If no one bothered to record the daily struggle of ink on sleeves, maybe it means everyone simply understood. You're not alone in this fight. As you finish the soaking stage, the maid hands you a stack of wrung-out garments to lay flat on drying mats. The household doesn't use racks, they spread laundry on woven reed mats in the garden, weighted with polished stones. The result is a softer finish and fewer wrinkles, but it's also more work. You kneel, carefully smoothing each piece. The grandfather's robe is wide and heavy, the boy's juban shrinks into itself if you're not careful, and the grandmother's formal overrobe is layered silk, so fine and delicate it practically hisses if you breathe on it. You glance up. She's watching. You smooth the collar with reverent hands. Good, she says. You're not rushing. Once the mats are full, you begin heating a kettle of rice starch solution. This is for the maid's task, lightly painting the hems and sleeves of certain garments with starch to keep them crisp. You assist by holding the cloth taut while she applies the mixture with a flat wooden paddle. This part is what separates us from farmers, she says. They rinse. We prepare. You nod again. It's hard to argue with that when you're literally starching a toddler's festival kosode. Later, as the garments dry in the breeze, you help prepare storage bundles. Each piece is folded with dried herbs, wrapped in soft cloth, and labeled with a tiny brush mark. The grandmother's robes get clove and mint, the boys get pine and rice husk, and the maid insists on mugwort for her own. Keeps the mice and the spirits out. You carry a bundle of fresh laundry back into the house, where the air smells of tatame, soy broth, and the faint metallic bite of the family's shrine ornaments being polished for tomorrow. You're given a small cup of tea and a rice cracker as thanks. As you sip, you glance back through the doorway and see the rows of drying clothes fluttering in the garden like flags, each one folded, scented, and waiting. Laundry isn't always just about dirt. It's about memory. A collar stained by a spilled bowl of noodles. A sleeve frayed from too many goodbye hugs. A pattern chosen decades ago, still bold against the sunlight. You bow politely, collect your washcloth, and return home with the scent of someone else's soap in your sleeves. You're tired, but it's the good kind. You wake to the distant clang of temple bells. Not the soft ones used for tea ceremonies. The deep, steady kind that mark death. Someone has passed. Not in your household, but in the neighboring village. Word spreads quickly, as it always does when the air smells of incense and clean cloth. You step outside into the pale light of dawn and know what's expected of you today. Funeral customs in samurai society are many things. Formal, solemn, and rooted in centuries of spiritual practice. But underneath all of it lies one quiet, unspoken truth. The dead must be clean. You gather your things and begin walking the winding path toward the village temple, where preparations are already underway. You've been asked to assist, not with the ceremony itself, but with the garments, the final dressing, the afterlife laundry. You arrive to find the temple gate open, the courtyard swept, and a few monks moving quietly between stone lanterns. Inside a small side room, the body rests on a mat, covered with a plain white sheet. Beside it, carefully folded, the death robe, a pure white kosode stitched with unbleached cotton thread. No decoration, no pattern, just simplicity, a life distilled into cloth. You wash your hands with ladled water from the ritual basin, then kneel before the robe. It's new, but still it needs tending. Even a fresh death robe must be softened, prepared, purified. You begin with warm water infused with crushed camellia leaves and shoyu vinegar. Not much, just enough to awaken the fabric. You dip a cloth and gently pat the inner seams, careful not to saturate. The point isn't to wash dirt, it's to remove the world. A young monk watches from the doorway. The robe should carry nothing, he says softly. Not even yesterday. You nod. Once the cloth is cleansed, you turn to the head wrap, a simple length of white linen that will be tied around the forehead. It's been folded tightly and needs pressing. You use a warm ceramic plate, placing it briefly over the cloth, allowing the steam from the fire-warmed air to smooth the creases. You move slowly, hand steady, breath even. There's a pace for this kind of work, neither rushed nor ceremonial. It's somewhere in between, quiet, purposeful. The cloth listens to your fingers. Historians still argue whether samurai death dressings were this precise across all classes. High-ranking warriors were often buried in full regalia or armor, while others wore only a kosode and were cremated with their sword nearby. But almost all traditions agree on one thing: you do not send someone off wearing stains. The robe is now ready. You help fold it once more, tucking the sleeves in, letting the edges align with quiet perfection. Later, the monks will dress the body, adding the ceremonial sandals, the prayer beads, and, if the family chooses, a small coin tucked inside the sleeve for the journey across the Sanzu River. You wash your hands again, this time more slowly. The vinegar and camellia scent still clings to your palms. You breathe it in. As you step back into the temple courtyard, the wind picks up. White banners flutter overhead, strung between beams. They carry prayers, wishes, the last breaths of memory, written on cloth. You find a spot near the gate and sit in the shade, watching as people begin to arrive. Some wear formal robes, others wear their best kosode, slightly stiff from being hastily pressed that morning. All clean, because no one brings stains to a farewell. You sip a cup of warm tea brought by one of the monks. It's quiet here, but not heavy, not yet. You think about your own robe, the one folded at the bottom of your cedar chest. White, plain, tucked between a pair of tabi and a sash you haven't worn in years. You remember pressing it yourself months ago, not out of fear but as a kind of practice, like preparing an offering, or writing a poem no one else will read. Death laundry is not for the dead. It's for those who stay, to fold, to rinse, to remember, to make sure the last thing touching the skin of someone you loved was cared for. The day after the funeral feels slower. Still, the kind of stillness that settles into the corners of a room and hums gently in the background, like cloth resting after too much sun. You wake later than usual, your limbs reluctant, your cosode already slightly rumpled from a restless sleep. You stretch, sip cool tea from the bottom of last night's cup, and step outside. The air is quiet. The sky is pale, as if it, too, has taken on the softness of morning. Today is a day of folding. There's no laundry to wash, no tubs to scrub, no ash to stir into paste. Just clean garments, dry now, waiting to be put away. But in this household, even folding has its own gravity. You begin with your daily cosode, soft cotton, faintly creased, still smelling faintly of cedar and vinegar. You lay it flat across a tatami mat, line up the sleeves, fold the hem just so. The motion is familiar, calming. The fabric resists slightly, then yields, settling into shape as if it knows exactly where it belongs. Next, the jubin, then the fundoshi, each folded carefully, patiently. You tuck a small sachet of crushed shiso leaf and dried rice husks between layers. Not for scent exactly, but for continuity. You learned this from your grandmother. Fabric remembers, she'd say. So give it something worth remembering. You move on to the summer cosode, thinner, lighter, but always prone to wrinkling. You smooth the sleeves with your palm, press the seams with the heel of your hand, then fold the fabric inward like you're closing a book. A story written in sweat, tea, and sun. Nearby, you open the armor cloth drawer. Your lightly oiled coat rests inside, wrapped in a rice starch cloth you changed only 3 days ago. You refold it, not because it needs it, but because you need the motion, the ritual, the sense of order being quietly restored. Then, a surprise. At the bottom of the drawer, a child's cosode, one of your cousins, left behind during a visit and forgotten beneath a stack of undersleeves. It's faintly dusty, but otherwise clean. You unfold it, shake it out gently, and press it between your palms. There's a sticky handprint on the inside collar. Plum jam, probably. You smile. You rinse the spot in warm tea water, dab it with vinegar, and hang it in the sun. No schedule, no rush. Some laundry is best done on a quiet day, when you have the space to laugh at a stain and mean it. You sit on the porch as the sun moves slowly across the yard. Your stack of folded garments rests beside you, neat, quiet, weightless in its own way. You've been through weeks of washing, scrubbing, soaking, starching, folding, airing, oiling, stitching, and sometimes praying. And now, you rest. You think of all the things laundry has taught you. That sweat isn't shameful, just memory trying to cling a little longer. That even the most stubborn stains can be lightened with time, patience, and salt. That a cosode folded right can feel like an exhale. And that dignity doesn't come from decoration, comes from care. You close your eyes, leaning back slightly, listening to the quiet. There's nothing else you need to do today. No sleeves to chase in the wind. No vinegar spills to clean. Just the soft rustle of clean garments in a cedar chest, the smell of dried tea leaves, and the knowledge that, for now, everything is in its place. Even you. The breeze is softer now. The kind of breeze that doesn't rustle, just brushes past gently, like fingers skimming across a sleeve left out in the sun. You breathe deeply. The scent of cedar, vinegar, warm cotton, and a trace of crushed mint lingers in the air. It's clean, not crisp or sharp, but quiet, familiar, the smell of something made whole again. The courtyard is still. Your laundry is done, every fold tucked, every stitch mended. No armor left unwiped, no ghost of sweat haunting your cosode. You can feel the absence of chore now, like a room after a song ends. Not empty, just settled. You sit beside your stacked garments, watching the last of the light stretch across the floor. Shadows grow longer. Everything softens, even the corners of your thoughts. You don't think about tomorrow's dirt, or the next festival, or whether the clouds will roll in again. You just sit, wrapped in the gentle weight of fresh sleeves and the calm that follows care. In a world where so much comes undone, you've done this. You washed, you mended, you folded, and for tonight, that's enough. Let your breath slow. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let the sound of drying cloth and distant crickets carry you quietly into stillness. You are clean. You are quiet. You are ready to rest.